I'll tell you the whole story. Wow. Wow.
Okay.
Hey everybody. Good morning. Morning. So today we'd like to finish the section on the long short path, which is the first system of the meditation that the Alter Rebbe is sharing with us, and then we'll start hopefully next week the short long path, which is the second system meditation based on a different type of love and awe as well. So let's review where we are so far in terms of the long short path, and then we'll do our morning meditation, which hopefully some of us can connect to some of the prayer that we've done this morning, whether it's a quick Shema or anything else. And then I'd like to finish chapter 17, which is the end of the long short path. So just to recap. Who could tell me the essence of the long short path? It's creating love and awe based on what on the long short path? Anybody recall our conversations? Yeah. So we're creating in the long short path. We create emotions based on what? Based on what's the
The divine concept.
Okay, a divine concept, yeah, which we examine with what?
With intelligence.
Intellect, exactly. So that's the main thing you want to remember. The long short path is hamoach shlit halev. The mind controls the heart. So we're actually not going directly to the heart to create emotions, which is what meditation is about. I want to create, as we said, love and fear, which are the two wings that allow everything that I do and all the stuff around me to elevate. Right? Because as Jews, we meditate to elevate the world around us and our actions. So we create those wings, that love and awe, not using our heart directly, but using our intellect. And that's where meditation comes in. So when I meditate, I clear my mind, as we've done. I focus my mind on, as you said, divine concept. And then by focusing on that divine concept, I intellectually generate both love and awe. And those become the wings that allow either our Torah study right here, right, or the mitzvahs that we're going to do, whether it's giving charity or doing a blessing on food or loving another Jew or not expressing anger or shaking a lulav and etrog or blowing the shofar next month. Any of the things we do here at Temple as Jews, there's a spectrum through which those actions can impact the world and elevate the world. Right? So they can just be kind of, I did them and there they are, or they can go right up to even to the world of Bria and in some cases create unifications there and bring in new light to the world. Right? And all this may not be that obvious to my conscious mind, because as we learned earlier, there's a garment between my conscious mind and the rest of my soul, the greater part of my soul. Not all of us have a thin garment. Some of us have a thicker garment, and we're not that conscious of what's happening in our soul, but it makes no difference. The soul is active in that way, and it can help to elevate all the Torah mitzvahs around me. But the long short way is by creating love and awe, and even if that love and awe doesn't become, as we said, a burning flame of love and fear, the Alter Rebbe described these tefuna emotions, which are more like emotions as they're still in the intellect. Right? So I might know something and not have feelings about it, or I might know something and then have a strong opinion that that's a good thing or a bad thing. And that's not quite a full emotion, but it's getting there, right? Like, I have a feeling I should have a feeling about it. So that tefuna emotion, if that can actually function in the same way as a full-blown emotion in terms of elevating Torah mitzvahs. And even though I might not feel like I have the joy and the delight of true love and awe and the catharsis of it, it's not about me. It's about the Torah mitzvahs. And so if I have to use those tefuna emotions, that does the job just as well, and I should understand that I fulfilled my soul's purpose. I've used meditation properly, and I've actually changed the world permanently for the better.
So the Buddha emotions are the same but not as intense, or?
They can accomplish the same thing.
Okay.
They're not the same,
Okay.
right? I mean, the same way, a newborn is not the same as a 3-year-old. It's not the same as a 10-year-old, right? So it's not the same, but, a child is born and the family has love and joy. I mean, a newborn and a 10-year-old are the same in that way. Now I have a child, right? So in some ways they're the same, in some ways they're not. But what they can do is they can accomplish the same thing, right? Twin emotions develop into full-blown emotions, right? And there's differences, but they can do the same thing. And the same thing is, because I've generated it intellectually, now my Torah mitzvahs, I can elevate them not just to the spiritual world of Asiya, which is kind of the world just above our normal consciousness. I can even go past that to the world of Yetzirah, which is a much more rarefied spiritual world that is really a spiritually emotional world, as it were. And I can even go above that because I've generated it through my intellect. Its root is in the world of Bria, even above that. So I can actually elevate Torah mitzvahs way up to this world of Bria, which is a world that is lit up by just, call it, the spirituality of intellect, pure intellect. And even if my soul has no business there, no station there, using my tefuna emotions and using meditation, I can elevate Torah mitzvahs to the world of Bria, which is an amazing feat. Yeah, and even though I'm not having strong sensations or emotions myself, the tefuna emotions allow my Torah mitzvahs to fly up if I focus on them, meditate on them.
Well, I don't even know the question is, what's the value of having the motion elevated, or the mitzvah elevated?
Well, I mean, let's look at it like any social situation, right? If someone gives me a gift, right, and they walk up and they say, "Here, happy birthday," and they walk away. Okay, they've given me a gift, and I guess I should be grateful and happy, right? But it's missing something, you know what I mean, right? Whereas if somebody gives me a little nothing, I mean, it could be a much less valuable gift, but they come and they say, "Oh, I've been waiting for this day. I'm so proud of everything you've done. Happy birthday. I want you to have this, and I love you," right? They do it with a lot of emotion. Now, I don't even care what the gift is, but it has a lot of impact on me, right? So the cosmos is a living thing, and we're also dealing with God. Like Torah mitzvahs, as Jews, this is our soul path. This is the pathway God has given us to elevate the world. So it's no different, right? If I do something to bring joy to God with less emotion, then it's going to have less impact. And if I do it with more emotion, just like when I get a birthday gift, it's going to have more impact. More joy will flow down from the source of the cosmos. You know what I mean?
So having more emotion elevates the mitzvah.
Yeah, just like it elevates any
Kavanah.
kavanah. Absolutely, yeah. Kavanah is a good word to describe
Yeah.
the depth of emotion and connection and focus. Yeah.
When we elevate the world, what are we elevating?
We're elevating the spiritual spark that makes up the world back to its source. Right? So there's a spark of godliness that's been trapped in every aspect of the physical world, and it's been waiting there for small ash to come and interact with it and elevate it, if it's something that I'm interacting with, right? And I can come and I can be a mature person and do something good with it and do it with a lot of emotion. And now that spark returns to its source, and an additional piece of the universe has now been, as it were, put back into place in the full puzzle.
What's the advantage of living in that world as against the one we live in?
Which world do we live in?
The real world is the world I live in, I think.
Yeah. So the advantage of living in the world where you're repairing the world and fixing it versus just this is a normal physical world? That's the advantage? To me, the advantage is I might be doing the same activity, right? So I might sit down for breakfast, and if I'm living in, I think, what many Americans think of as just the normal physical world, there's food, there's me, I'm eating, off I go, right? It may have been a very neutral moment, or otherwise, I don't know. Now, if I'm living in this world that I'm describing, I'm not sitting down for breakfast neutral. I'm actually encountering God, a spark of God, that's here, that's been waiting for me for the entire duration of the existence of the universe, and now I'm having a deep interaction with it, and I'm serving it and bringing it back to its source and repairing a piece of the world. So, I don't know about you, but I find personally that second experience richer and more meaningful. And as Label says, since you can't prove or disprove one or the other, why not pick the richer, more meaningful life? So, to me, that's what the advantage is.
But you're going to eat the same breakfast.
Yes, in the physical world, you'll just eat the same breakfast. So, no difference. It does not change how you live your life physically. You still eat breakfast and go and take care of your kids and give some charity. I just think, to me, my experience is it provides a depth and a joy and a sense of purpose that provides many benefits, including health, including longevity, including, just social happiness, all that. But that's off topic, yeah?
So, well, and then when you encounter other people, you carry that feeling with you and it spreads.
Well, yes. If breakfast is a spark that I need to be responsible for, then, of course, an interaction with another person is even more of a responsibility, because every time we speak to someone, same choice, right? I could say, random conversation, maybe a waste of time, maybe it's going to be fun for me, maybe it's going to be annoying, and I don't know. But if I say every encounter is a divine providence, is a spark for me to elevate and for me to learn from, now every conversation I have, okay, God put us here in this moment to learn from each other. Let's listen, let's be respectful, let's help each other. I think that one becomes a more mature person by living with that worldview. That's been my experience.
Eat your Wheaties and get your spark.
That's right. Eat your Wheaties, return the spark. Very nice.
So is it about being mindful to elevate the spark
Yes.
in everything we do?
Yes, exactly, yeah. And then in chapter 17, we looked at, finally, this verse upon which the entire Tanya is based, which we have not discussed yet since the opening. Ki karov elecha devar meod bipicha vavcha lasoto. Right? That's chapter 17, beginning of chapter 17. Yeah? And there he explained the reason that the Tanya is based on this verse is that it's very easy to do all this, to be mindful at every moment of elevating every mitzvah and every aspect of Torah, doing it all. It's very easy because we all have control over our mind. We can all create at least tevuna emotions. And whether that lights our heart aflame or not, that's not close to everybody. But the tevuna emotions, that anyone can do. If you sit and you focus on a divine idea like I should love my neighbor as myself, every morning for 15 minutes, I focus on it and let it fill up my whole mind. It is a guarantee I will now create tevuna emotions. And when I meet that person, and maybe they say something that I would normally respond poorly to, now I'm going to have a sense of respect. I'm here to not respond poorly. I'm here to love this person like myself, and I'm going to have a sense of love for them. And although it may not fill me up and I'm dancing around wanting to have this conversation, I'll at least have the tevuna emotions that will change my behavior and cause me to be more respectful and also more loving, if not effusively, at least in a tevuna sense. And that will elevate that interaction. Yeah, so it's really very near. Any one of us always has control over our mind, as we said. We can focus it on whatever we want, and in that meditation, I can create tevuna emotions, and that will direct my heart in the sense that I'm doing love and awe that cause me to do something, right? And that was how we finished. The quote finishes with la soto. Ki karov elecha devar meod bipicha levavcha la soto. And la soto is a qualifier on bilvavcha, right? As we discussed last class, it's not easy to cause your heart to have emotions, but it's easy to cause your heart to have emotions that are practical, emotions that are enough to do it. So la soto is the qualifier. What kind of emotions are close to us? The tevuna emotions that lead to action. Thought, speech, and action, right? So as long as I am creating tevuna emotions using this meditative technique, and then I am behaving in that way in my thought, speech, and action, those emotions are very close. I can always create them. And once I've created them, I have access to them anytime. No matter what I think I'm being triggered, no matter what I think I have no control over, I can always return to them, and I can always create enough tevuna emotions to actually do the right thing and be a Bainani.
A possible example, I don't know if this is an example or not,
Yeah,
but I have a neighbor who I don't know real well.
yeah.
And they went to
Very nice, very nice.
So I don't know if that's something that you could use, that would be an example of.
I think, you could look at that and say, how nice, you're a nice neighbor and you did a nice thing and feel good about it. You could also say, okay, on the one hand, you were treating another like yourself because you'd like that to happen. So that's a formal mitzvah. You were giving them in-kind services, which I could say, for me to get someone to water my plants for a trip might cost, I don't know, $50. So that's a donation of charity that allowed them to actually visit Israel. And the more conscious you are of the way this fits into all the kind of pathways of the mitzvahs that we have, the more you can say, oh, I'm doing this and I'm actually loving doing this. Like, I like helping neighbors, I enjoy it. And you can elevate that energy spiritually so it doesn't just become like you're a good person, you water your neighbor's plants. It actually also raises sparks up, as we said. Absolutely, yeah. I mean, our lives are full of this. We say every Jewish person is as full of mitzvahs as a pomegranate of seeds. Right? So once you start looking at your life with this lens of what mitzvahs are available to me today, you realize almost all the time and most interactions have some element that we can use to spiritually elevate.
What about the person who has a fear when they're watering their neighbor's plants that they're going to kill them?
That's, yeah.
Yes, that
Yeah.
you took on a responsibility that maybe you weren't couldn't do. Well,
Yeah, so it's good. Yeah, so every situation is unique, and that's the beauty of life is I assess each situation on its merits, and I want to find the appropriate response for that one, right? So how does fear play into this? Absolutely. It's true that part of watering your neighbor's plants is a certain respect that now it's my job to take care of them. For instance, if I forget for 3 days and a plant dies, now I haven't really fulfilled my promise. So that's a place where fear would come in a productive way, or respect, right? But like the psychological fear, I might do something wrong, like that may be going too far, and that's just like my hang-up or something, right? I mean, if I know how to water a plant and I do it well, that's a reasonable initiative, and I've done the mitzvah. So, fear has a place in some ways. In some ways, maybe we can go too far if it's just.
To do a blee netter.
Right, there you go. So let's
With a disclosure before, you say, look, I'm gonna do my best. If it doesn't happen, at least I tried.
So is
If
that-
you're comfortable with that, then I'll be comfortable.
Is that pretty clear in terms of the long, short path?
Yeah.
So I think this will be the last time we use the meditation we're using, which is Su Marom Enechem. Next week I want to introduce a new meditation that I'll invite us to use for the short, long path. So I hope it's familiar to everyone by now. Let's find ourselves in a comfortable position. And there's all kinds of benefits to slowing your breathing down, right? Improving your heart rate variability, improving your nervous system, getting out of fight or flight mode into parasympathetic mode. So just slow your breath down, knowing there's all kinds of health benefits, etc. We have the 4 even sections of breath: the in-breath, the hold, the out-breath, and another hold at that point. If you can, bring your breath down to your belly, so your belly swells out as you breathe in. 2, 3, 4, and let that stay. 2, 3, 4, relax out. 2, 3, 4, and let that stay. And do a few of those cycles on your own. Let's create our wisdom gateway, the space, the waiting between the end of the in-breath and the beginning of the out-breath. That will be our wisdom gateway. And in that gateway, let's put our meditation of Shema, the word Shema, Shin Mem Ayin. And the letters stand for Se'u Marom Enechem, lift up your eyes. Let those letters grow in size and brightness, if you like. Let your mind fill with a sense that we have infinite capacity to lift our eyes and see deeper and deeper meaning in really every moment of every day. If you like, you can picture a tfuna tap that's flowing out of these letters, a tap of tfuna emotions. And let those emotions, that beautiful white sense of love, that beautiful red sense of respect and awe, let them flow out. Let them soak into and elevate each of the thoughts, speech, and actions that you will do today. This sense of elevated consciousness, of mindfulness of each moment has the power to fulfill my soul's purpose and elevate so much. Notice if there's some little corner of your mind that's spinning off on some other topic, just let the letters and the light from them fill that part of your mind too, until it's all filled to the brim. When you're ready, wiggle your toes and fingers, open your eyes. It's nice even if you're not learning Tanya to do this. It's just nice, right? It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. All right, so now here we go. We are in chapter 17. 240, yes. So this, we're really covering a little tag here where the Alter Rebbe has said anyone can do this. Here, I'm sorry, I only have 18 here. Can you share? Thanks. But now the Alter says, what about people that are truly wicked and all they have active is their nefesh b'amit? Right? Because we said there's a complete Russia that exists. That complete Russia, they're 100% nefesh b'amit. Every thought, every action, every word is the nefesh b'amit speaking. So how can, thanks, an extra one here. So how can that person actually still have their mind control their heart if it's all just nefesh b'amit, right? So the Alter Rebbe will address it. It's not unharsh, but there is a way out. Okay, so let's do it. So v'zeh onesh, we're bottom of 248. V'zeh onesh al godel ve'otzem avonam. This is
the punishment for the enormity and potency of your sinfulness.
Right, so I've lived my whole life. This isn't necessarily like a Hitler, but this is a person who is 100% self-centered. So every interaction, what's in it for me, right? Every word, what can I get out of this? Every meal, how can I enjoy this? Every expenditure, what's this going to do for me? Every business deal, how can I get the most out of this? This person is just committed completely to 100% self-centered activity, and they don't even have a little quiet conscience that comes in and says, maybe you should have taken advantage of that little old lady, Smollash, right? It's just that I've shut that out, and it has no place in my life anymore. It's just all me,
There's
right?
a radio station, WIIFM.
W-I-I-I. Exactly.
WIIFM,
That's in from there you go. So it's a rare person that is just 100% like this, but how can this person now say their divine soul is going to ignite their mind to control their heart if it's all animal soul, right? So since I've lived my life this way, I've made these choices, now this is my consequence that it's going to be much harder for me to assert productive, mature control over my heart. V'lo dibra Torah b'metim elu, shebechayehem kruyim metim.
The Torah does not speak of death,
Right? So this is something that's discussed in the Talmud, is that if someone is really, really, really wicked, and we're saying our life is actually doing good, productive, other-centered things, then in a sense, if this person has no good, productive, other-centered things they're doing, in a sense, they're not alive, because that really is our life by the Talmud. And because they're metaphorically dead, we can say, well, when I said anyone can do this, I meant anyone who's alive, obviously, because if you're dead, you can't eat, you can't move, right? So it's a little sort of play on words, a little way out, but saying if someone really, really is committed to never thinking about another person in their life, then that's not really a living person. I'm not talking about them. כי באמת אי אפשר לרשעים להתחיל לעבוד השם בלי שיעשו תשובה על העבר תחילה.
Indeed, it is impossible for the wicked to begin to serve God, that is, to observe the mitzvot out of feeling of love and fear of God, without first repenting for their past.
So here he introduces the concept of tshuva, repentance, and he's going to touch on incredibly profound teaching that he elaborates on in another section of the Tanya, Igeres Tshuva, which is writings about how to do tshuva on many different levels, and very, very profound book. And we'll touch on it now, but if you want to know more, there's a whole other book in the Tanya that deals only with this question of what is tshuva and how does it play in, especially with somebody who's, in this case, gone so far that they're a complete Russia. לשבר הקליפות שהם מסך מבדיל ומחיצה של ברזל המפסקת בינם לאביהם שבשמיים.
In order to shatter the kalipa?
Klipot, yeah, klipot.
That were created by their sins, from which a sundering curtain and an iron wall that interposes between them and their Father in heaven.
I find it interesting that this was written, before the rise of the Soviet Union, and he uses the term iron curtain, iron wall, right?
Yeah.
Interesting, but that's what it is. When I become so self-centered that my divine soul is now not in my consciousness at all, I've created a barrier between me and my soul, between me and my link with God, and I have to now shatter that if I'm going to reestablish this normal, balanced existence where my divine soul, can weigh in and can be the second judge and can give me a chance at maturing. על ידי שבירת ליבו ומרירת נפשו על חטאתיו.
How are these kalipot shattered? By means of contriteness of heart and bitterness of soul over one's sins.
And so you got, if a person like that would look back, and I think we all know from our failings how painful it can be to look back and say, if I'm honest, I hurt someone. If I'm honest, I let the world down. I let my family down. If I'm honest, I let myself down. I caused harm in the world. At whatever level I'm doing it, it's painful to look very clearly and do that, and it breaks your heart a little. And imagine if that's basically everything in your life. Imagine if you could look back and you'd say, wow, I can't think of one thing that I thought, said, or did that truly was for someone else. I don't know when the last time, to really face that would break your heart. And that breaking of the heart, that's what shatters the barrier, and that allows access again. And I think if we've not experienced it, we've seen it, that when someone's truly in a state of repentance and it's sincere, it's
These individuals who are totally wicked, may repent themselves over Yom Kippur
Oh yeah, they can do it anytime. But-
without doing tshuva.
Well, they'd have to do tshuva on Yom Kippur. Yeah.
So that is their tshuva, coming to the services and saying prayers?
Well, in addition to really being sorry and apologizing to anyone they truly hurt, and also resolving to actually change their behavior and not do it again and improve it. So if that is genuinely in place, that's tshuva, and then on Yom Kippur they can actually wipe away, significant or all of it halakhically. Yeah. So it's available. It's just God's not going to make it easy. You know what I mean? Like they got to really push the needle on that. כמו שכתוב בזוהר על פסוק, זבחי אלוקים רוח נשברה, לב נשבר וגומר, שעל ידי לב נשברה רוח הטומאה דסתרא אחרא.
broken spirit, a broken and contrite heart, to mean that through one's breaking his heart, the unclean spirit of the Sitra Achara is broken, and this is the sacrifice that we offer to the divine name Elohim.
Yeah, so now we're getting into a very profound teaching from the Zohar about what tshuva is, and he's pointing out that right when we sacrifice in the Torah, it's always to Havaya, it's always to the Yud and the Hey and the Vav and the Hey, right? But this breaking of the heart, that's like a precursor, and there it's to actually Elohim, the other name of God, right? But basically we want to.
It's the judgment.
Yeah. So we need to get past that to get to like the Yud K Vav K name. Ve'ayin sham Parshat Pinchas daf Reish Mem u'Parshat Vayikra daf Chet v'daf Hey Amud Aleph u'Firush Harav Moshe Zakut Sham.
See Zohar on Parshat Pinchas, page 240, and on Parshat Vayikra, page 8 and page 5a, and the commentary of Rabbi Moshe Zachuto thereon.
So he's giving us a little homework here. He just touched on it. If you want to do more, just reference. Go ahead and do your reading. I have not read those. V'chi b'chinat tshuva tata lehalot he tata lahakima min filata shenafla el hachitzonim.
This is the lower category of repentance, whereby the lower letter hey is raised up from its fall into a force of evil that creeps.
Right, so this is a little Star Wars, right? We like this. So this is the word tshuva. Tshuva, right? So we've seen this word probably. Tshuva means repentance or atonement. And the Zohar points out this very profound teaching that you can read it tshuva, repentance, or you can read it tashuv. That's the word tashuv, as a return. Hey. Right? So tshuva also means the return of the hay, returning the hay. Right? Now, which hay are we talking about? You remember in the divine name, you got a yud and a hey, and then the second half of it, you have a vav and a hey, right? So there's two hays. And this hay, this is a long while back. We went through a whole thing where we said, this hay refers to divine speech, this hay refers to divine emotions, this hay refers to divine bina, this hay refers to divine chokhmah, and the little crown on top is divine ruts, is keter, or divine will, as it were. Right, so each of these represents a whole map of the sefirot as we learned them. Right, the vav being the 6 emotions is a letter, vav is 6, right, and hey is taking something and stretching it out so it has dimensions so you can express it. Bina is dimensions, hey is the breath like that starts speech. So in every way the letters, as we learned, correspond to that aspect of how eventually the Ein Sof is doing something which we're calling divine speech, which obviously is not some giant being in space moving a giant mouth, right? It's something else. But in this case, there's 2 hays that one can return, the lower hay and the upper hay. In this case, we're talking about this hay here. In Igeres Tshuva, he talks about higher level tshuva. Once you've done the lower level, there's another level of tshuva that can be done, which is returning the upper hay, which maybe we'll learn in another class. But in this case, the lower hay is just saying, if I really work hard enough at being self-centered, and I really create that barrier kind of like, it sits here and it kind of dislodges this hay from the way that my soul is flowing out of the divine name. Right? So my little piece of the divine name, I put a wall here, and this hay is like, it's somehow dislocated, and it can even like be pulled down into my narishkeit, into what's called the klipa. Right? So I'm all about me. Okay, I've taken my little piece of this divine hay, and I've jammed it into all that meanness, and that spark of divinity that is Michael, that's being self-centered, now that hay has to be self-centered too, because guess what I am? I'm just coming from there. So I've taken my little piece of divine name, and I've dragged it down into the klipa.
This one's Bina, what's the other hay?
It's Chokhmah, Bina, that's the Midot, Chesed, Gvur, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, and that's Malchut, that's expression. Yeah. So what is tshuva? Tshuva is taking that dislocated hay that I've created through my actions, breaking that barrier, and raising it back up so the hay can return and be a part fully of the divine name of the 4 letters in my flow, right, in my world. So that's just on one foot. That's the concept that is introduced in Iggeres Tshuva, in a whole book that's dedicated to that concept of how we approach high holidays, how we approach tshuva generally, the lower tshuva, the higher tshuva. Amazing, amazing stuff. You want to read the note there, tshuva, repentance.
Okay. Tshuva, repentance, spelled
Tshuva, yeah.
forms the words returning the hay. This implies that repentance returns the hay of the divine name. Divine name, Haveya, to the proper place. The higher category of tshuva returns the higher, the first hay, to the yud preceding it, while the lower form of tshuva returns the lower hay to the vav preceding it. The tshuva mentioned earlier as a prerequisite for a love and fear of God is of the lower category.
Right, so before I'm going to start to be able to ignite this love and fear using the long short path, I got to get that wall out of the way, because my divine soul doesn't have access, it can't control the heart, right? So I first need to do tshuva before I can now meditate and allow my divine soul to ignite and allow it to create tfuna emotions and then create, and that elevate my mitzvahs and my Torah. First thing I have to do is do a low level tshuva where I say, sorry, I was so self-centered, I'm going to try and be better, I'm going to apologize, and I feel that, right? And that breaks the wall, the hay returns, and now my divine soul says, hi, I'm back. And now we start with the whole business with the right and left side of the heart, and now I got to work each day to continue to mature.
That's the crying out to God.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Wow.
Yeah, if you've been a parent and you've seen a child that's really sorry about something they did, and you're like, but you have to have this consequence because that's the rule. And they're like, oh, I'm so sorry. You're like, oh, fine, come here, right? So, as parents, we know when a child is really sorry, like it changes the equation. There's something that transcends the sort of right and wrong rules we have as parents, and we forgive, and we forget, and we let it go, right? So we have that with God too, a true crying out from your heart about wanting to be better and regretting my mistakes can repair things. Shehu sod galut hashchina kimamar rabbeinu zichronom livracha galu le'edom shchina imahem.
This fall of the lower hay of the divine name into the Kelbal is the mystery of the Shekhinah, the divine presence, and exile. As our sages have said, when the Jews were exiled to Edom, the Shekhinah went into exile with them.
Right, so it's a strange philosophical reality that Judaism could say God created the world, God rules the world, God is everywhere, and guess what? Now God allowed God's presence to be exiled into Edom, into the Roman exile, which we're still in, kabbalistically speaking, right? I don't see the presence of God in a apparent, patent way when I go to the Kotel, right? There's no divine flame coming down. I don't see it, and that's because now we're still in exile, right? That used to happen, and now it doesn't happen, according to Kabbalah. So how is it that God that's all-powerful could be actually exiled? That's a bit of a mystery. But it's the same as how my divine soul can still be providing life force to me, but I could essentially be completely self-centered. I'm taking that energy of the divine soul, I'm living my life, and basically I'm doing everything the opposite of what the divine soul wants to do, which is being other-centered. So there's actually a parallel, right? Every time I drag my highest self down into lower order behavior, that's a mirror of how it is that the whole Jewish people has dragged the Shekhinah, God's presence, into exile because of our hating each other needlessly and our not living up to our potential. Tayinu כשאדם עושה מעשה אדום, מוריד וממשיך לשם בחינת וניצוץ אלוקות המחיה את נפש רוח נשמה שלו.
In a spiritual sense, in terms of one's service to God, this statement means that when one the embodiment of evil. When he sins, he degrades and draws down to a dome, to the klipot, the divine spark which vitalizes his nefesh, ruach, and neshama with godly, holy life. In this way, the Shekhinah within him is drawn into exile.
So each of us has a little piece of that whole, and by our actions, we can elevate the world back to its source, which is what we're trying to do by meditating. Or I can just be mindless and self-centered, and now I'm taking that spark of divinity that I was granted today. Good morning, small ash. Try and do something good with your soul energy, and I draw it down into the klipa, because if I'm self-centered, that's where I'm active, and that's where my energy is being embedded.
I thought that was a positive thing, because the Shekhinah, it's the fact that we have a portable God. The Shekhinah goes everywhere. It's everywhere. And that's the part of God that we keep with us.
Yeah, but that was the case even when there wasn't the exile of the Shekhinah. That even when the temple was standing, 10 Jews traveled to wherever and had a minyan or did a mitzvah, so the Shekhinah was still there too. That's not like a novel. That's not a novelty of us being in exile. It's just that the Shekhinah is in exile, meaning that we're not conscious of it. It's like it can't get into the world to consciously affect us. So I know that's a gloss that people put on rabbinic Judaism, that we create something that was portable and it has an advantage over the temple. But
not that it has an advantage over the temple,
Yeah.
just that it's with us, and that's what allowed us to survive.
of course, yeah. So it's an advantage in that it's with us and allows us to survive, but I prefer not to have the exile. I prefer to have, in my life, conscious awareness of godliness. And I think, when we were a Jewish people in the temple and that was the center of our civilization, we prefer to not have it destroyed and lose touch with that. Even if the Shekhinah hasn't left us, it's still with us in exile, right? And if you think about the Shekhinah's experience in exile, going through God knows what throughout history, that's not fun for God either, to have to witness all that stuff. But it's a big philosophical question. I don't want to get mired in it. Hamlubashim bo benefesh habamit מהקליפה שבליבו שבחלל השמאלי המולכת בו בעודו רשע ומושלת בעיר קטנה שלו.
What constitutes exile in this case is the fact that the divine spark gives life to his godly soul, which is closed in the animal soul of Klipa, situated in the left part of his heart. And as long as he remains wicked, the animal soul reigns over him, dominating his small city, his body. Thus the divine spark within his godly soul is in exile in the Klipa of the animal soul.
Right, so perhaps the arc of Jewish history, I feel there's nothing I can do about that. But which aspect of which soul gets to control thought, speech, and action today, that I have a choice. And that does have an impact. It pushes the needle, maybe just a tiny bit, but has an impact on the greater picture. So that's for us, that's our avoiding bringing the Shekhinah into exile, avoiding bringing my divine soul into exile, into the thought, speech, and action of the animal soul. That's my job as trying to be a Beinoni, is to work with what's happening in my heart and always make sure my intellect controls it, lets the divine soul sit up and have an opinion, at least have a say, and then allow that light to kind of finally push it over so the divine soul gets to do the thinking, the speaking, and the acting. If I do that, I'm retrieving my personal Shekhinah from its exile in my animal soul. And it can be as simple as not saying something that I want to say. Right? It can be simple as taking a moment to do a blessing with a little bit of intention. It can be simple as, you know what, I don't feel like giving this $1, but I'm going to give this $1. It has a huge impact. ונפש רוח נשמה כבושים בגולה אצלה.
The captive not only lacks the freedom to act as he wishes, but is also forced to carry out the wishes of his captor. The divine spark within the soul, however, although in exile, is still not in captivity. It has merely lost its ability to affect the person with its godly vitality.
Sorry, did I miss a paragraph?
No.
We did Hamushim Bo
In
Banefesh?
English, the nefesh ruach.
Oh.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, the nefesh. Oh, sorry.
No worries.
The nefesh ruach.
Yeah, so the nefesh, ruach, and shema are thus held captive in exile under it. So here, there's a little gloss, there's a distinction we're making. Something that is in exile might, so I'm not in my homeland, I'm in exile, I'm out of my home, but I'm still free to move around and do what I want and try to get back home. If I'm held captive, now I'm actually in a prison with chains on, I actually don't have freedom to even like try and get back to my home. So it's two levels, right? I might be in exile, but not held captive, or I might be completely nefesh b'amit oriented. Now the divine soul is even held captive by the animal soul because it can never think, speak, or act. Hopefully none of us is in this category. We're mostly dealing with, we're normal, a normal Russia, not a complete Russia, and we're just trying to improve things and mature. When the heart
of the Rasha is broken within him, and thereby the spirit of uncleanliness and of the sifra achra are broken, and the forces of evil are dispersed. Then the lower hay of the divine name, the Shekhinah, rises from its fall and stands firm, as discussed elsewhere.
Right, so the Hebrew hikama min filata v'gam nitzva kmo shnitba'er b'makom acher. So that's the kabbalistic description of what is we accomplish. Right, I haven't just become a better person. I'm not just kinder to people around me and now contribute better. I actually have returned a little piece of the divine name to its source. I've repaired it, and I've done my part to allow the world to take one step closer to that tipping point where now we see that the world is really just godliness and spirituality. So I want to share a little anecdote that I find inspiring, and then next week we'll start chapter 18. 18 through 25 is now the short long path, which is another meditative technique. So that'll be a good new beginning. But I want to share a story because I know when we started this, we talked about how we're not just learning a book, we're actually having an encounter with a master. Right? The Alter Rebbe, who lived hundreds of years ago, he himself said, "You've seen my face, you've sat in the room, you talked to me, you think that's who I am. No, if you really want to connect with me, you have to learn my Hasidus, learn this book. Because at Tzaddik, their true being is not their physical body, as we've discussed. The true being is their Torah and their mitzvahs, and especially Torah that they write and teach, that novel stuff they've created, that's really the core of their soul." So the Alter Rebbe said, as we said when we started this, once he had thousands and tens of thousands of Hasidim and could no longer see everyone individually, he said, "I'm writing this book in particular to replace Yechidus, and it will be the same as a Yechidus with me. I'm writing this book that all the advice that I give to everybody, it's contained in it for every different type of person. And when you learn this book, it is spiritually the same as having Yechidus with me, and if you want to be connected with me, learning this book is actually, in a way, more powerful than even having a meeting with me. Because you're only seeing my physical body, you're not necessarily seeing who I am at the essence." And so that's hard for us to really digest, I think, as North Americans. We're used to learning pretty linearly, that here's some information, I learn it, now it's in my brain, now I know it, and I'm done with the book, and now I have the info. And we're being asked to learn holistically, where we're saying the information is actually alive, it's the being, that's the master, and I'm having a meeting, I'm actually encountering a master. And someone whose soul works in a way that is much higher than my soul, and I can't really predict or understand the ways that these connections happen. So there's an anecdote I've only shared with a few people, but I think it'll be inspiring for us to... Okay, sorry you have to go. No worries. And that is, I think, demonstrates how this information flows and how it really is a living being and more than just information. And that is, I don't know how many people know, I grew up actually directly across the street from a yeshiva, a religious school, that was based entirely on this book, right? A Chabad yeshiva, which is the form of Hasidus that the Alter Rebbe created and taught. And their all the Hasidim teach is an explanation of this book, basically. Right? So from the age of, 2 or 3 until I moved out at 19, I woke up, I looked out the window, and there they were learning davening across the street. of course, I was a secular guy. I didn't want to, I had one conversation with someone from this school that was 6 words long. It was, not a very deep conversation, and that was the entirety of my connection. Never heard of the Tanya, never learned with them, never spoke to them, no connection whatsoever. Now, fast forward, some 30 years later, when I arrived at Temple, we have a tradition at Temple that each clergy person picks one line from anywhere in the entire Tanakh, so Torah, Nevi'im, Ketuvim, Psalms, ethics to our fathers, any line that inspires you, you can pick to write on your tallis. And I didn't pick like a well-known line. I'd never heard a rabbi in my 10 years at Charleston, Montreal, in my 7 years at Holy Blossom. No one had ever brought this up in a sermon. I'd never heard him teach about it, but it appealed to me. I liked it. And so I picked this one line from Deuteronomy, not a well-known line, and wrote it on my tallis. And then fast forward another 11 years or so when I met Label and was reading his book, and this is exciting. I didn't know this stuff was in Judaism and learning about it. And then another 6 months later, he said, there's this book, the Tanya, that really my teachings are based on. You may want to open it up and learn it. It's like, okay, let me see. So we opened it up, and lo and behold, as we learned, it says the whole book is based on Ki karov elecha davar me'od b'picha levavcha lasato. Right. So this is now 35 years after I moved out of my parents' house from across the yeshiva. Never heard of the Tanya. I open it up. That's the line that the whole text is based on. That the school that I grew up in, that I never talked to them, but I slept steeped in that thing. I walked around past it, like the vibration was there, but never consciously. So guess what line I chose to put on my tallis? Here it is. Ki karov elecha davar me'od b'picha levavcha. I didn't like la soto. I didn't like the mitzvahs at the time, so I took off la soto, right? Which is a whole other conversation. But literally, the line that is the central line that the whole Tanya is based on, that the entire yeshiva that I grew up across the street from that never spoke to is organized around, that's the line I picked, and not even a well-known line.
Because it was across the street from you.
It was vibrating, I don't know. Right? So, yeah, it was very close. Now, some people might say, okay, there's a chance that that's just coincidence, because there's only about, I think, 6,000 verses in the Torah.
I think it's more than
That's 1 in 6,000. And then if you count the rest of the writings, maybe, I don't know, maybe it's up to 20 or 30,000. But there is a 1 in 20 or 30,000 chance, that's just coincidence, that you happen to pick a very unknown line that the yeshiva across the street from where you grew up, that you never consciously spoke to, was based on, and that they're all meditating on, etc. But I feel like it's an illustration of how it is that we learn this text and how we should learn this text, which it's not a static thing. It's not just neutral information. We really have a chance to have an encounter with one of the greatest Jewish mystics, a personal encounter, if we take this approach seriously. And that encounter, their soul is really aware of us and aware of the world in a way that it's hard for a normal person like me to understand. But rest assured, this isn't the only sort of anecdotal situation like this that's happened to me, but you don't normally share this stuff. But there's all kinds of ways once you get into it where you see, this is a soul that's still here, that still cares about us, that's connecting, and the more we learn about it, the more life becomes really sort of a classroom where we're simply sitting with the Ein Sof, with God, and trying to absorb as much as we can and give back and reflect and give joy to the Ein Sof. And we have no way of knowing how that light and energy from the Tanya can spread from our lives to people around us and the amount of good we can do. Some of it happens behind our backs, and we only find out 35 years later.
Is this something like the influence of the Schneerson, the Lubavitcher rabbi?
Yeah, when I was growing up, he was the Rebbe of that yeshiva, and so they all went and visited him and
Right, New York, I know that.
yeah, but I
Is it the same kind of thing? The Alter Rebbe would be similar to
yes, the Rebbe Schneerson you're talking about was the 7th generation disciple from the Alter Rebbe. So the Alter Rebbe trained the Mittler Rebbe, his son, who trained. Yeah, so like the Dalai Lamas passed down. So Schneerson was the 20th century Rebbe from this exact system, direct